Okay, so we're on the week 4 reading about carrying capacity, species interactions, and the summative fact sheet. So you should have this open. This is on page 1. So as you read section 1, look out for details that will help you do the following in your week 4 vocab and check for understanding document. You're going to look for details that you can add for these vocab words: competition, predator prey, limiting factors, and carrying capacity. And you're also going to be looking out for things that can help you answer these 2 checks for understanding. So the first one, what does it mean for resources to be finite? And what are some things that can affect resource availability for a population and ecosystem? Then for the second check for understanding, describe how competition for natural resources and overpopulation can lower carrying capacity of a species. All right, so let's think about those things while we read this first section. Section 1, limiting factors, species interactions, and carrying capacity. In any ecosystem, the growth and survival of any organism depends on the physical conditions and on the resources available to that organism. If they have unlimited resources, living things could produce populations of infinite or unlimited size. Within an ecosystem, however, resources such as oxygen, carbon dioxide, water, nutrients, space, and sunlight are finite, meaning they're limited. This has a great effect on the interactions among organisms. Because the resources are finite, organisms must compete with each other to survive. So it sounds like there's a lot of information there to help us not only answer, add information for the vocab word competition, but also answer that first check for understanding question. So if I were you, I would pause this and answer that check for understanding question in your document, and then play when you're ready to go back to that second paragraph. But right now I'm going to read the second paragraph. Competition is the struggle for resources among organisms. Within any one species, competition keeps the size of that species' population in check. In established ecosystems, populations tend to increase or decrease depending on resources that are available to them at that time. The variation in population tends to follow a predictable cycle. Many populations, for example, vary with the seasons. Over time, however, the size of a population remains stable. Factors in the environment that limit the size of populations is known as limiting factors. Some limiting factors are abiotic and others are biotic. We already learned that in week 1, right? For example, abiotic factors such as the amount of space available, the intensity of light, and the temperature are all abiotic factors that may limit the number of plants that are available to grow and live in a jungle. See figure 1 for an example of how limited resources can affect the population size of an organism. So let's look at figure 1. I know Mr. Weisler went over this in the slides, but let's see what figure 1 says. The deer population, or this brown line, correlates or changes according to the changes in the green line, which is the amount of plants available for the deer in that habitat. And the plants, we need to remind ourselves that is the resource for the deer for their food. As the amount of deer grow, right, as they increase, you see a decline in the plant population. Why is that? Because there's more deer eating the plants. Habitat damage occurs when there's too many deer consuming on these resources or on the plants. This causes more competition for food, right, to increase for the deer because there's more deer competing with each other for food. Some deer eventually die due to starvation because their food resources are finite or limited, and competition for those resources has increased. When the deer population is lower here, more plants begin to grow in the ecosystem, and that's where we can see this green line going up. The populations of each species fluctuates or goes up and down from there on, right? Let's look here. An important biotic factor that also limits the population size is the relationship between predators, which kill and eat other organisms, and their prey, which are killed for food. As predators kill and eat their prey, they limit the growth of the prey population. If too many prey animals are killed, predators begin to starve and their population is reduced. With fewer predators, the size of the population of prey begins to recover or start to grow again. So right now I would go back to your vocab, add information for predator-prey, limiting factors, including predation and competition, right? Those are both biotic limiting factors, and carrying capacity. Then I would also add information to answer check for understanding 2. Describe how competition for resources and overpopulation, like in the deer example in figure 1, can lower the carrying capacity of a species.